You are at Fickle Creek Farm in Efland, North Carolina, which is in Orange County, right in the center of the Piedmont region of North Carolina. And we describe Fickle Creek Farm as a small-scale, diversified, sustainable farm. This farm right here is 61 acres. That's kind of the size of it. The sustainability part comes in with our practices. We are trying to produce food at the same time that we protect the environment and bring in minimal inputs from the outside. And that's always a challenge. The produce we grow is completely by organic standards and practices. However, we've chosen to not get certified because sometimes what I call technically organic but not sustainable option just doesn't make sense. We've decided to use locally milled feed, for example. The reason for that is to get the certified organic feed that we had available at the time. It came from a much longer distance. We sell retail direct. We do very little wholesale. So it's not like our product is on a shelf somewhere and the only thing the consumer has to go by is the stamp on it that says certified organic. We're very lucky in that we have a customer base that really supports us. They come out to the markets in rain or shine. They appreciate what we're doing and how we're doing it. But that helps financially, of course, but that also gets us into kind of communally sustainable. The farmer and the farm workers have to make a living along the way too. So it has to be sustainable for the farmer first. This farm is what I would call a agroforestry system. A definition for agroforestry: the inclusion of a woody perennial component in a farming system meant to produce livestock and or produce. So our trees, just like our livestock, we look at in two ways. They have service benefits and they have product benefits. So examples that we get from the trees are shade, improved aesthetics, erosion control. The trees are doing a lot of things that aren't necessarily monetary income, but they are important services to be sustainable and to be an enjoyable place to farm. We heat our home with firewood, and so firewood is an actual product. So there are products as well from the trees. By having not only our crops and our pastures, but then completely natural forested areas, our biodiversity is much, much higher than most agricultural systems. The livestock that we have brought to the farm and that we have now all got here because we were trying to meet a need of the farm's sustainability. Chickens, for example, we started with laying hens. And yes, we needed the income, but we also needed the fertilizer that they were producing. And so not only did they produce the fertilizer, but they spread it and incorporated it for us. The chickens are really good for insect control as well, and weed seed control. All of those are, again, our services first. Then I think we got pigs next. Their service at the very outset was to eradicate noxious weeds that we couldn't get rid of any other way, because of course we don't use herbicides. And then we found out just serendipitously that they're also great for raising rocks from pastures, and they bring them to the surface and then we can just go out and collect them much more readily. They are great for understory clearing. So we'll take a managed small woodlot area and we'll put pigs in it and they'll clear it, the understory for us, so then we can get in to do the thinning that we want to do. Now what we do as part of our standard procedure is to clear a paddock that has produce in it with sheep. So they eat all the vegetation, the remnants of a crop. Then we bring in chickens typically, and they eat down even further, and they eat weed seeds and scratch. And then finally we bring in the ducks, and they just go right down the rows, just like kind of shoveling along with their beaks, and the slugs are gone. So, and of course, again, they produce eggs, so they're paying for themselves. We're at the very top of Cane Creek watershed, which is the water for Carborough and Chapel Hill. This farm is a farm conservation easement, and that means we sold our development rights. So there will never be development on this property beyond what is here now. You've probably heard many times farming is really hard work, and it is. I do feel like we're just one of many farms in this area that are farming along these lines, and we do make a significant impact.
Hi, I'm Pooh Sprague. The family and I own Edgewater Farm in Plainfield, New Hampshire. It's my daughter Sarah over there, son Raymond, and my wife Ann. Edgewater Farm is about 270 acres, 70 of it tillable, and we're in a diverse mix of small fruit, vegetables, and greenhouse crops. Pretty much everything that we grow on the farm is marketed through our two farm stands. Our basic philosophy is that because we have such sandy soils here, and we're using them so intensively, that we just feel that cover crops are an important component in soil amendment and just basically maintaining a healthier soil, the fauna in the soil, rather than going in and clean cultivating massive areas. There's a lot of wasted space. So we cover crop whenever we possibly can. We use a summer smother when we have finished up a short-term crop like peas in particular. If we're not going back with something immediately, we'll use a summer smother to suppress weeds and add some organic matter. Buckwheat is probably the simplest summer smother for us to manage. It's very quick. We seed it anywhere. I think the recommended rate is a bushel per acre, but I'm sure that we glom on pretty close to 2 or even more sometimes. It's very quick, it's very easy to work down. We have a set of fairly heavy harrows, and we can go in right now in short order and incorporate this with a set of harrows as well as put on a winter cover crop at the same time. So it's very easy to manage in terms of the machinery that we own. What we have here is a crop of Japanese millet on a piece of fairly heavy ground that we're not using this year, so we're using a longer season cover crop here to build organic matter in the soil. The ground was well prepared when we got onto this. We broadcast about 3 bushels the acre, which is very, very heavy, as you can see. But we figure if you're going to grow a crop and the fertility is there, you might as well put it on heavy, especially with cover crops. I like the Japanese millet over the Sudan as it's a little easier to incorporate. If the Sudan and Sudex get ahead of you, which they sometimes can when you're picking vegetables late in the summer, it can get quite woody and it's very hard to incorporate in the fall. It's now about the 15th of August. Hopefully in another week we'll get someone down here with a heavy set of harrows and we'll harrow this up. Probably once over, we'll chop it up and expose a little of the dirt. We'll come in and broadcast either peas and oats on top of that or hairy vetch and winter rye and disc it in lightly, and that'll give us a winter cover crop. This is a system we've been using for about 10 years on our very sandy soils. Certain crops, like the tomatoes, melons, summer squash, vine crops, we've interseeded between the rows of the crop. We put in strips of clover. This does 2 things for us. One, we feel we're getting some benefit to the soil by cover cropping and not clean cultivating. And second of all, it just makes a nice work environment, as you can see, for the workers to pick. It gives us some cultural benefits in terms of the plants. Instead of crowding them, they've got, 10 feet. That makes it easier to spray. It makes so that they get better air drainage. We use white clover in this system as opposed to grasses. On sandy soil, we found that white clover establishes itself, it tillers out, makes a nice, real nice mat by the fall. We manage it by seeding it early in April. We seed it with a brilliant seeder after the bed's been prepared for both the laying of plastic. We'll come through after the plastic's down, the drip tape's down, and we'll seed the clover, and long before we come in and transplant the crop. It needs the early spring moisture to get established. And then we'll mow it several times, usually when it gets about 6 to 8 inches high with the weeds, or when it gets to be a nuisance, or the help will let me know if it needs to be mowed. It'll usually come up to broad leaves and all manner of weeds, and we mow the weeds off several times. That usually suppresses all the broad leaves. And sometimes we'll have an issue in June with crabgrass, and we may come in with post or some post-emergent grass herbicide. This particular cover crop has not been sprayed with anything. We've just managed it by mowing. White clover is probably the most expensive cover we could put down, but because of its height, because it establishes well for us, and because it is a legume, we think that it's probably well worth it.